Hi everyone. So today is a very hot day here. I think we've got about 28 degrees of hot weather today. So this book in the first frame is my book, and the reason why I ended up reading or coming across the book to the right of it. So when I wrote this book back in 2017, it was for a writing competition, but it never made it through. And I was only able to publish it in 2021. And then last year, it was discovered by one of the teachers that do the LTSM selection for their school, and they decided to select it for their English class, the grade 8 English class. And as a consequence of this, I suppose, I started wondering about the books that get selected in schools for kids to read. And I just wanted to understand that, So what I did was I started looking through the internet trying to find information about books that are setworks in schools. And so this one, titled Shoki's Son, I chose to talk about it today because it's Africa Day, and also it is a book written by a South African about a South African in South Africa. So it's based in a place called Langeban or Langeban. Afrikaans doesn't Afrikaans over here. So, but yeah, Langeban is the place where this story is set, and it's about, I think the kid is 13, maybe 14 at most. It's about a boy whose father suddenly and mysteriously disappears, and he suddenly feels unsafe and very suspicious of the whereabouts and the conditions or the circumstances under which his father has disappeared, because he just went without explanation. He left the things that normally when he goes out to do what he does on a daily basis or on a regular basis, he does not leave behind. So the child starts to suspect and becomes suspicious of people around him, especially this one guy who comes to take charge of him and speaks as though he was sent by the child's father to take care of him and to do things. And so, based on some of the information or what this man says to him, it gets his hackles up, and he decides to go on a quest to find out the truth about what has happened to his father, and confront him about all these things that this person has said to him about what must happen to the boy. So the boy doesn't want what this man says his father said, which is that he must go and live with his relative who lives in Cape Town. Anyway, so this book, I like it, and I definitely think I'll give it a 3-star. At the end, I'm only halfway through it, by the way, unless there's something really major that happens that, I suppose annoys or angers me in some way. I am unlikely to give it a rating less than 3. And the reason I won't give it a rating higher than 3 is simply because this is a story about a child, but the themes or the things for which the child is preoccupied with or has to deal with are things like they're adult things. They are things that have been brought about by the decisions made by adults. So he is forced to sort of grow up. And so, even in the story, although you're reading from the third person's point of view that is looking through his eyes or is focused on him, There are certain parts where he is very precocious. And so, because the themes are quite adult and he can think, in such a mature way, you tend to forget that you're actually reading a story about a child. And I don't know if the author meant to do that deliberately or it was just accidental. But that's what I don't like, because I feel that, children, especially for the ages, I think this is a grade 6 or grade 7 book, children should be reading literature not to be confronted with stories about kids who are dealing with adult problems. Children should be looking at or reading about stories where kids are dealing with other kid issues and navigating that and trying to get through that or resolve those things, and not things where kids have to make life altering decisions, decisions that could affect the rest of their lives, and they are not old enough to be making such decisions in the first place. So, but Shaki's son is such a lovely story. I mean, the third frame that I've given here is just from a page where it talks about how he suddenly is overwhelmed or overcome with grief. So this grief is sort of it's like delayed onset grief, because he's grieving a mother that died when he was young, but it was brought on by events that unfolded in his present time that made him think about the absence of his mother, and that was even more amplified by what has happened with his father and the position he finds himself in, and the fact that he doesn't feel safe, he doesn't feel secure, he doesn't know who to trust. I think the writer has really written this character very well, in my opinion, of course, because I suppose you get to see that, even though he sometimes sounds or acts or makes decisions that are, you know, more mature than he is, there are things that he does. There's moments where you are reminded of just how young he is and how he just wants to be careful. He wants to be a child, but, he cannot, because the situation doesn't allow him to be so. And so I think, well, I mean, it is unfortunate that the story has such heavy themes, but it is written in such a lovely, accessible way that I think, kids on their own can read and understand and follow the story. And then, with the help of their teachers, they can work through the emotions, they can work through even why the story is so adult life heavy. And that means, at least, as a pick for kids in South African schools to read, it is relevant and I support it, and I'm glad that this book gets to be that for the kids, because my main gripe with discovering all the books that have been selected as setworks is that most of them are foreign stories. So the stories about other countries, other places, written by people who are not even South Africans, and they basically have the potential to make our kids who read those stories wish they lived in those countries. Instead of wanting to make a life here, they can then feel that I wish I lived there, or, because they've become more familiar with and they know more about a country that isn't their own than they do their own. And that is a shame, because education isn't supposed to teach kids for other countries. The education of a country is supposed to teach kids for itself, because the kids are the country's future. That's who the country's gonna need at some later years, in order to run, to prosper, and be successful. But alas, a long video. Thank you for listening. All right, bye.